Most men over 60 are not making obvious style mistakes. The era of the truly visible wardrobe failure, the wrong size jacket, the cargo shorts, the graphic tee, is something most men who care about how they look have already moved past. They have addressed the big things. The fit is reasonable, the color palette is generally appropriate, the shoes are not embarrassing. And yet something is still off. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone would point to directly, but consistently, persistently, in a way that registers below the threshold of conscious attention. There is something that adds years, that makes the overall impression slightly more tired, slightly more dated, slightly less sharp than the effort that went into the outfit actually warrants. This is the territory of invisible mistakes, not the large nameable errors, but the small overlooked details that most men stopped questioning years ago, if they ever questioned them at all. A collar that has softened just enough to lose its shape, a trouser length that is a centimetre too long, a shirt that has been tucked in inconsistently for so long that the unevenness has become invisible to the man wearing it, a watch that is slightly too large for the wrist, a belt that does not quite match the register of everything else. These things do not announce themselves, but they accumulate, and their accumulated effect is a man who looks to everyone around him as if something is slightly not working, without anyone being able to name exactly what. This video is about naming them, one by one, clearly and specifically, because once you can see them, you cannot unsee them, and once you have corrected them, the improvement in your overall appearance will be immediate, visible, and more significant than most men expect from changes. This channel is about classic menswear, timeless style, and the practical details that make men over 60 look sharper, more considered, and more in control of how they present themselves. Today we are going into the details most channels never discuss, because they are invisible until they are not. The first invisible mistake is the one closest to the face and therefore the most impactful, the softened collar. A shirt collar does a specific job. It frames the face and the neckline, creates a clean transition between the shirt and the neck, and signals that the shirt is in good condition and was deliberately chosen. When a collar is functioning correctly, lying flat, holding its shape symmetrically, sitting clean against the neck, it does this job without drawing attention to itself. But when a collar has softened and lost its structure, when the points begin to curl upward or outward, when the collar lies asymmetrically with one side higher than the other, when the fabric has washed down to a softness that no longer holds the designed shape, it does the opposite. It draws attention to itself as something that is not quite right, even when nobody can name what they are looking at. The softened collar is particularly common on Oxford shirts and polo shirts that have been worn and washed many times. Cotton loses structural integrity with repeated washing, and the collar, the most structurally specific part of the shirt, shows this deterioration first. Many men are wearing shirts whose collars stopped working correctly several years ago, in some cases several dozen washes ago. They have seen the collar every day, and the change has been too gradual to register. But other people see it immediately. The test is simple. Put the shirt on, and look at the collar in a mirror from the distance at which other people see you, 3 to 4 feet. Does it lie flat, symmetrically on both sides? Does it sit cleanly against the neck without curling or rising? If the answer is no to either question, the collar is no longer serving its purpose. The shirt may still be wearable, but it is working against your appearance rather than for it. For polo shirts, the collar should sit flat and structured, not rolled, not soft, not visibly thinner at one end than the other. A polo collar that has lost its structure is one of the most common and most immediately visible signs of a shirt that has been kept past its working life. The second invisible mistake is one of the most overlooked in all style advice because it occurs at the bottom of the outfit where most men's attention stops, the trouser break. The break, the fold of fabric where the trouser meets the top of the shoe, is one of the most precise indicators of whether a man's trousers fit correctly and whether he has paid attention to the details of his outfit. Most men's trousers are either too long, creating a stacking effect where the fabric folds over itself above the shoe in multiple layers of excess fabric, or the correct length but worn with shoes that add enough height to cause the same stacking effect. Either way, the result is the same. The trouser hem is not creating a clean single break at the top of the shoe. It is collapsing into the shoe, creating visual clutter at exactly the point where the outfit should resolve cleanly. This is a mistake that adds years and removes height simultaneously. Excess fabric stacking at the ankle makes the legs look shorter, the feet look larger, and the overall silhouette look compressed and slightly shapeless. It is the trouser equivalent of the softened collar, a detail that the man wearing it stopped seeing long ago, but that registers to everyone looking at him as something that is not quite right. The fix is the simplest alteration any tailor can make. Hemming a trouser costs almost nothing and takes minutes. The result is a clean, single break, one soft fold of fabric landing at the top of the shoe that instantly makes the trouser, and by extension the entire outfit, look more deliberate and more considered. And if a man changes shoe height regularly, the trouser length should be checked against each pair, because a trouser hemmed for slim leather shoes will stack on thick-soled trainers. The third invisible mistake is one that most men think they do not make, and most men do make: the untucked but should be tucked shirt. More specifically, the shirt that is partially tucked in at the front, out at the sides, or fully tucked but working loose throughout the day. This in-between state is the worst of both worlds. A deliberately untucked shirt in the right context with the right shirt looks intentional. A fully tucked shirt with a clean line at the waist looks sharp and defined. But a shirt that is partly one and partly the other, especially one that started tucked and has gradually come untucked during the course of a day, looks like a man who is not paying attention. The fabric billowing slightly at the side, the shirt tail visible at one hip but not the other, the waistline lost beneath the confusion of fabric. These are details that register immediately as careless, regardless of how good the shirt itself is. There is also a specific version of this mistake that is particular to men over 60, the overly long shirt tail. Many dress shirts and Oxford shirts cut for an older demographic are made with very long shirt tails, designed to remain tucked even through significant movement. When worn tucked, these long tails are invisible, but when a man with one of these shirts chooses to wear it untucked, sometimes deliberately, sometimes because it simply came loose, the extremely long tail hangs visibly below the trouser line, creating a silhouette that looks neither tucked nor untucked, but simply like an outfit that was assembled without attention. The simple rule is that a shirt worn untucked should have a tail that ends at the hip, not below it. The solution is either a firm decision to tuck or not tuck, maintained consistently, or, for men whose shirts persistently come loose, shirt stays, a simple and inexpensive device that keeps the shirt tail anchored to the trouser top, maintaining the clean line at the waist throughout the day without any further attention required. The fourth invisible mistake sits at the wrist, the watch that is too large. Oversized watches, pieces with cases larger than 44 millimeters, heavy bezels, prominent chronograph dials or thick cases were a strong trend in men's watches for a long period. Many men over 60 bought into that trend and are still wearing the same piece a decade or more later. The watch still works, the watch may still be beautiful, but on a wrist that has changed with age, where the wrist tends to become slightly thinner and the forearm slightly less muscular, an oversized watch creates a disproportionate relationship between the wrist and the timepiece that reads as slightly wrong without anyone being able to name exactly why. A watch should fit the wrist it sits on. The case diameter should be proportional to the wrist circumference, and for most men over 60, that means a case no larger than 40 millimeters to 42 millimeters, and often smaller. At the right size, a watch sits as part of the outfit, a refined detail that catches the eye briefly and then allows the eye to continue upward to the man's face. At too large a size, it catches the eye and holds it, the watch becoming the focal point of the wrist rather than a supporting detail. The fifth invisible mistake is the one that most directly communicates a man's relationship with the details of his appearance. Mismatched leather. A brown leather belt worn with black leather shoes, a black watch strap worn with brown leather loafers, a tan leather wallet placed on a restaurant table beside a navy outfit with no brown leather element. These mismatches are not dramatic and not always obvious to the wearer, but they are immediately visible to anyone who registers detail, and in aggregate, across an outfit, they create the impression of a man who assembled his clothing without thinking about how the elements relate to each other. There is a specific version of this mistake that is more common than most men realize: a belt in the wrong width for the trouser. A wide Western-style belt, anything over 35 millimeters, creates a visual interruption at the waist that draws the eye downward and cuts the body in half. A slim, refined leather belt in the correct width, typically 25 millimeters to 30 millimeters for most smart casual trousers and chinos, sits at the waist without drawing attention, allowing the eye to move upward toward the face. Belt width is not something most men consciously consider, but it is something that creates an immediate difference in how the waist reads and how the overall silhouette flows. The leather goods rule is simple and requires almost no ongoing effort. Brown leather coordinates with brown leather shoes, belt, bag, and watch strap, all in the same warm family. Black leather coordinates with black leather, and the primary leather tone in any outfit is determined by the shoe. Because shoes are the most visible leather element, they set the standard to which everything else should conform. A man who applies this rule consistently creates a coherent, finished quality to his overall presentation that is immediately felt, even by people who have never consciously thought about leather coordination. Here is what all 5 of these mistakes share. They are not about the quality of the clothes. They are not about money or brand or access to expensive things. They are about attention. A man who attends to his collar, his trouser length, his shirt tuck, his watch proportion, and his leather coordination is a man who has thought about the details of his appearance, and that thought is what registers to everyone who looks at him as the impression of a man who is completely in control of how he shows up. So here is the question. Of these 5 invisible mistakes, the softened collar, the trouser break, the partial tuck, the oversized watch, the mismatched leather, which one do you think you have been making without realizing it? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. If you appreciate honest, practical style advice for men over 60, subscribe to the channel. In the next video, we are going into the color decisions that make the biggest difference to how sharp and how present a man over 60 looks, and which colors to build the entire wardrobe around. You will not want to miss that one.